Hi, my name is Josh, and this is going to be the first video in a series of videos going through the SQL 50 study plan on Leetcode. I think this study plan is a really good place to start whenever you're first getting your feet wet working with SQL and SQL queries. So for this problem, let's take a look at our table. The table is called products, and we have three columns right here. We have the product ID column, which is an integer. Now this means that it's a number. We have low fats and recyclable, and these are both enums. Now, an enum type means that it's kind of like a drop down that you'll get when you're filling out a form. It's not an empty box that you could just write wherever you want into it. And it's also not a like true or false option. It can be two up to however many options you want, but they're predetermined. So if I had, let's say this was my table, and let's say I had a little bit more of a complicated, I wanted a field that was availability. And I have a website and a store. And I want to be able to say that this item could be just available in the store, just available online, available at both, or out of stock. Those are four options. Now, an enum would be a really good way to represent that, and I would just make my four different options both available online, available in store, or out of stock. So what we need to do is we need to write a solution that gives us the IDs, which tells us what kind of data we need. So we're not trying to get these two columns, we're just getting this one. We need to get the IDs where both of them are going to be a Y, or a true or a yes. So if we look through this column, for instance, what we want is we want 1 because both are Y, and we want 3 because both are Y. Now we don't want 4, and that's kind of obvious, but it's just worth noting. Even though these are the same, they're not the right values, so we don't want them. And we don't want 0 because even though it has one Y, it doesn't have both Ys. So when writing a SQL query, a really good place to start is actually in the from clause, which is going to be our second line. And the from clause is just saying, where's this coming from? Now, we know that we're getting the data from the products table. And then for your first line, this is the select clause. Select clause is telling the computer or telling the database what kind of shape you want the data in, what do you want it to look like. And right now, all we want is we just want it to return to us all of the product IDs. So we're going to do select product ID. If we wanted to get all of the columns, we could do select star, which would give us all the columns, or we could write them all out. We could do select product ID, low fats, and so on and so forth like that. But we just want the ID. And then we have our where clause. Now the where clause is where the magic happens for this query. So how where clauses work is you're going to give it a condition of some kind, which is some kind of thing that's going to evaluate to true or false for every single row. And when it evaluates true, then it's going to be in your output. And when it evaluates false, it's just going to skip over it. And what you can do is you can actually chain these conditions together if you want, like this, and then use something called a logical operator in between. Now, for the most part, this is either an and or an or clause, or operator. So an or means that it will put the data into the output if one of these is true, which would work for these two, which is what we want. But you can see how it would also return 2 and 0 because there's a Y here, but an N here. But because there's one Y, it's going to return it in our data. We don't want that. What we're going to want is we want the AND clause. And the AND clause just makes sure that both conditions are true. So for our first condition, we just want low fats to equal Y. And our second condition is going to be the same thing. Recyclable to equal Y. and then we're going to throw on our semicolon at the end there, and we'll submit, and that should give us a successful test, and there it is. Now, it's important to notice that this is actually the worst runtime I've gotten every time I've done it. With SQL, more so than other languages on Leetcode, these things really tend to be unreliable. And part of it's because so much of it depends on the machine you're running, the network connection you have, and how it happens to hit the system when you make the submit button happen. And so what you'll do is I'll look through, and you can just click on this thing and you can see an example, and you'll see this is the exact same code that we wrote. If you'll look towards the front here, what happens is some of these are getting better performance because they're all written on one line. And that's just not really what we're concerned about right now. So you'll see I'm at the very back here, but all of these are the same exact queries. So that is problem number 1 for the SQL study plan. I'll see you with problem number 2.